don't know how to act. Yeah, I'm pointing out facts. If I point a finger, that's point of attack. Good point, who's next? Flag on the plate, now I'm causing them death. We bet on ourselves, so what you expect? A die-hard fan, never live with regret. Yes, sir. Go to my neck. Burgundy flex. Who wants the smoke? We bringing it home. Be my guest. Look how we step. Who we got next? Step on the right, step on the left. Who do we rep? Commanders. Where my soldiers? Right side. Commanders. Where my soldiers? Left side. Commanders. Where my soldiers? Watch the middle. Commanders. Where my soldiers? High off the way that this sound, they turn up as soon as they feed the ground. I am not playing around. I hit them, I bet that they feeling me now.
Welcome, one and all across the nation and around the world. I welcome you all to episode 24 of the Commanders Gridiron Report, brought to you by
Sertoba Media, where the struggle is real to be awesome.
I'm your host, Drew Willingham, and we are here to discuss week one in the NFL for the 2024 season for this team. And ironically, this is episode 24, the first time we've been back here for about a month, as a lot has happened in this past month for the Commanders, even myself, personally, professionally, and much more. And I want to take this time here before we get started to apologize to those of you who've been waiting for this show since this past Tuesday. Like I said, it's been a wild wind of a week for me, and that's why I'm just now able to get this started this evening. It's going to be a shorter episode than usual, but we'll cover what we need to cover in this edition. As like you see down here, we were supposed to have this show on the 10th, which was 3 days ago. And with that being said, we're going to go ahead and take this into our first segment, that being the 1st and 10.
They are the Washington Commanders. New name, new marks, new uniform.
Soldiers, are we ready for Operation Burgundy?
And here for the 1st and 10, we're going to take a look at week one this past weekend. On September 8th at 4 p.m., these two teams faced off. The Commanders traveled to Tampa Bay to take on the Buccaneers, and a team that had just made the playoffs the prior year, that being the 7-9 Buccaneers. And they came back, ready to start this 2024 season. The Commanders did too. I mean, they did put up 20 points. It was close in the first half. The second half, the Buccaneers pretty much ran away with this game. And when you take a look at how things went from end to end, when we overview this game, there's a whole lot more that we have to discuss when it comes to that. But for that, we have to take it to the Burgundy Flex review to see what's in store for that and discuss the review of this game.
Yes, go to my neck. Burgundy Flex. Who wants the smoke? We bringing it home. Be my guest.
And here for the Burgundy Flex review, we're going to have an in-depth look at the highlights from this game. As we got the graphic right here, the same as before for this past summer for the reviews for it, because when it comes to the Burgundy Flex review, the highlights primarily go to the other team, that being Tampa Bay. When we take a look at how things were in the first half, it was pretty close. I mean, overall, you look at how both of these teams did. In the first quarter, the Buccaneers were up 6-0 based on 2 field goals by Chase McLaughlin, a 56-yarder in the first for his first one, with 11:34 into the game. Then, we look at the next one, 34-yard field goal as well. The Buccaneers were up 6-0 after that in the first quarter. Now, our next quarter, we have a touchdown by Mike Evans, a 17-yard pass from Baker Mayfield with McLaughlin's extra point. They are up 13-0 at that point. The Commanders would finally answer, though, with a 7-yard run by Brian Robinson to make it a 13-7 game. And then Chase McLaughlin would add another field goal for his third of 3 on the day at that point in the second quarter to give the Buccaneers a 16-7 lead. This would all happen towards the end of the second quarter as well, with only 16 seconds remaining on the clock. The Commanders would just take a knee at that point to send it into halftime. Now, it was pretty close. You look at what Jaden Daniels was able to do. He was able to extend plays with his legs. When you look at the offensive line, especially in the first half of the game, there was some upgrades they made, especially with Nick Algoretti over the offseason, who came over from the Kansas City Chiefs, a part of that Super Bowl winning team last year, and has been in the NFL for a few years, doing it primarily with the Chiefs and now with the Commanders. Looking at what he's able to do to help, bolster this offensive line a little bit, it did work a little bit. They weren't like human turnstiles like the offensive line over in Carolina, but the first half of this game was pretty competitive, I'd have to say. When you're holding the Buccaneers to just 3 field goals and a touchdown, and then you get that first touchdown of the year, a rushing one by Brian Robinson in the second quarter, you were at least establishing a little bit of a run game at that point. But you can only establish so much when your offensive line is not quite where it needs to be. So looking at that, we would go into the second half, and that's when things started to open up a little bit more for the Commanders in some ways, but their defense, and keep in mind, this is a Dan Quinn run defense because he is a primarily defensive-minded coach, giving up 37 points on the day. I'll pull up that 1st and 10 graphic, even though we're in the Burgundy flex, but 37 points to only putting up 20, and those were garbage time points, at least in the second half, because they'd already put up 7 in the first half. They were held to 13 in the second half. When we get to the third quarter, there was another touchdown, but this time it was by Chris Godwin, who received a 4-yard pass from Baker Mayfield for the Buccaneers to go up 23-7. That was the biggest lead that they had at that point when they were up by 16 points. And, the Commanders would answer, but it would take them about another 5.5 minutes to do so when Jaden Daniels would score on a 1-yard touchdown run that was set up by Brian Robinson Jr., almost having a very long touchdown run on the play before that. But Jaden Daniels would score on a 1-yard touchdown run at that point for his first touchdown of the year, this being in the third quarter with only 1 minute and 52 seconds remaining in that quarter. The Commanders would only be down 23-14, but that was the closest the deficit would get for the remainder of the game at that point, because when you look at how things would open up in the fourth quarter for the Bucs, they would score a couple more touchdowns. Mike Evans was definitely active in this game. He scored his second touchdown on a 1-yard pass, but before that, Jalen McMillan would receive a 32-yard pass from Baker Mayfield to get the Buccaneers up 30-14 with 14:55 remaining in the fourth quarter. The following, it would be another possession later after the Commanders would have one where then Mike Evans would score another touchdown for his second of the day, which would be a 1-yard pass from Baker Mayfield. Chase McLaughlin was definitely on the money with his leg as he added another extra point, and they would be up for their largest deficit lead of the day, being 37-14. After that, the Daniels, I say the Daniels because he was something special to watch, and we'll get to that after we go over this last scoring review. Jaden Daniels would score on a 1-yard run again for his second touchdown of the day on the ground, but they would fail on a 2-point conversion by Jaden Daniels at that point, and they would not increase the lead anymore after that, as the Buccaneers would win this game 37-20 as a result. Now, looking at this, I'd have to say, when it comes to Jaden Daniels, there were some things that he did that definitely impressed me on the day. He didn't turn the ball over. That's number one. When you look at how, he was protecting the ball overall, even when he was running, now that this show is a few days later than it was supposed to be, because it was supposed to be Tuesday, we look at last night's game on Thursday Night Football between the Dolphins and the Bills, and you look at how Tua sustained his third concussion now over the course of the past 3 seasons, well, 2.5, because he played all 17 games last year and was healthy. But the year before that, he sustained 2 concussions in that 2022 season. Jaden Daniels, definitely a different style mobile quarterback than what we see out of Tua. He was able to extend the plays with his legs, and he knew when to slide. He was definitely not taking any shots that he wasn't supposed to, and he put up 16 carries for 88 yards to go along with those 2 touchdowns that we previously mentioned. So he was definitely getting it done on the ground, but I do have to make a point with that. I'd say probably 10 to 11 of those carries were not really designed quarterback runs. There were some that were, especially those 2 touchdowns that he scored that were 1-yard scampers away from the goal line. So you could take away 2 of those, and there were probably 3 that were considered, in my opinion, to be designed quarterback runs. That's 5 total designed quarterback runs. Outside of that, you got 11 carries of those 16 carries that he was literally not necessarily running for his life, but as he could see things break down on the offensive line, he had no other choice. He was either going to take a sack and lose yards like we would primarily do as the Commanders, the Commanders, doing what they did. And Sam Howell would be back there last year, and he wasn't a real mobile quarterback, so he would definitely get sacked a lot for a loss. There were even other plays where he was throwing it for an incompletion, that being Jaden Daniels throwing it for an incompletion after he had extended the plays, just trying to throw the ball away so that way there would be no turnovers. I really have to give praise on him in this Burgundy Flex review, because even though he sustained the loss in this first game that he played in the NFL, he scored 2 rushing touchdowns. He didn't score any, passing touchdowns. He didn't throw any receivers for a touchdown, because Brian Robinson Jr. got another rushing touchdown as well, as they put up 3 on the day. They weren't relying on field goals like they used to back in the day, even though they tried to extend the differential in points with with a kicker who was definitely not doing his greatest, Cade York. He missed 2 field goals on the day. He attempted a 56-yarder, and I believe the other one was like a high 30s. I just remember the 56-yarder off the top of my head, and that was the one right there where you could just feel in that moment that he wasn't coming back, and he isn't, and we'll talk about that more in the show. But Cade York was, again, 0 of 2 on the day when it comes to field goals. The defense, again, they've got to make some adjustments, because they only had 1 sack on the day, and that was by Cleveland Farrell. They did not force any turnovers when it comes to interceptions. They didn't, recover any fumbles. Special teams, there was nothing really to get excited about. The biggest things I would say to really get excited about in this game was Jaden Daniels and what he did, as far as it was an upgrade from Sam Howell last year when you look at the overall play that he presented. Now, the one thing to be concerned about is his highest, his number 1 receiver on the day was Austin Eckler, his running back, because there was a lot of check down passes he was throwing. 4 receptions for 52 yards on the day by Eckler, averaging 13 yards per catch, which is good. He was, moving the chains. But things were breaking down so much on the offensive line that I was saying it even in the past episodes during the offseason, that despite some of their good moves that they made this year with the draft and some free agents, it was really going to be this upcoming year's 2025 offseason that you really got to look at, as that's going to be what makes or breaks this team really advancing moving forward. So putting all that in perspective, what we saw in week 1, we're going to see a little bit more of that throughout this season. This offensive line still needs work. There's no way they're going to be able to go on a big run this year with the current lineup that they have on that front, because Austin Eckler is a good receiving back. He is not, at this point, his stage in his career, known for his legs as far as, rushing. So putting all that in perspective, got decent receiving back, and you can mix some things up with Scary Terry and the other weapons that you have at your disposal on your as far as your receivers. Luke McCaffrey was active in the game. Zach Ertz was active, and they both had 3 receptions apiece, but they had more receptions and more yards than Scary Terry McLaurin, and that kind of scares me a little bit, pardon the pun. When you think of the fact that he's your biggest deep threat, your number 1 receiver, and you're only able to get the ball to him 2 times for 17 yards. That's the number he wears on his jersey, not the number he wants to have in a game. So we'll have to see if this upcoming week with the game we're going to talk about the preview for in a few minutes, if they can actually do that or not. And I don't want to give too much away, but when it comes to the review of this previous game, your two running backs, Austin Eckler and Brian and Robinson, were your number one receivers. As we talked about Eckler's numbers, Robinson Jr. had 3 receptions for 49 yards on the day, averaging 16.3 yards per catch. So, and with your next leading receiver with 3 receptions and 28 yards being Zach Ertz, who's your tight end, you're doing a lot of checkdowns to your running backs, and you're doing a lot of small routes to your tight end. So you have got a long way to go before you start becoming, a team known for deep threats. The secondary of the Buccaneers wasn't really that active because there wasn't really any plays that were getting to them, because the one good thing about the Buccaneers is they have a very strong defensive front. And the Commanders are going to see other teams like the Buccaneers and better ones, in my opinion, with 16 other games that they have left to play in this year. It's an 18-week season, and they've played the first of 17 games. Now it's like a old school NFL season because you got 16 games left. So literally, you get your tune-up game in week 1, in my opinion, and then the real season starts in week 2. So we'll see if they can make any changes between now and the end of the year when it comes to offensive line additions, which I don't see any big key additions they can make even via trade this season. It's going to be during the offseason, and we're going to have to do some digging to see who's actually available when it comes to offensive linemen who are free agents or the potential trade moves they can make. And that's something we're going to have to look forward to between myself and you, the viewer, when we're back on our regular Tuesday schedule to see what they have available. But with that being said, we normally would take a commercial break right now, but to keep things moving, we're going to go ahead and go to the Soldiers of the Week and acknowledge who the MVPs of this previous Week 1 contest were.
Where's my soldiers? Right side. Commanders. Where's my soldiers? Left side.
And that's right. Neither one of the 3 Soldiers of the Week are coming from the Commanders. I'm going to give them all to the Buccaneers. I mean, was that really a surprise, or was it not? Let's look at these people real quick. When it comes to Baker Mayfield, 24 of 30 for 289 passing yards and 4 passing touchdowns on the day. He, in my opinion, was the number 1 Soldier of the Week, followed by Chris Godwin, who had 8 receptions for 83 yards and 1 reception touchdown. Even though he had 1 less reception touchdown than Mike Evans, he did a lot more within those 3 additional receptions to set things up for this team and set up the other scores, especially by Mike Evans. I got to give it to Chris Godwin for the number 2 Soldier of the Week. And then our third one, of course, 5 receptions, 61 yards, and those 2 big touchdowns there in the red zone. You got to give it to Mike Evans here. Those are my 3 standouts from Week 1. Unfortunately, it happens to be players from another team, but hey, you got to do what you got to do when it comes to judging these things correctly. And sometimes I'll mix it up with Commanders and the opponent in there for the Soldier of the Week. And if it's just bad enough, like in this type of loss right here, when you're losing by 17 points, I just have to give the Soldier of the Week to the entirety of the other team. And that's what I did in this episode 24. And with that being said, we're going to take this into our next segment, which is the Showstopper. Discuss a little bit more action for this team.
I off the way that this sound, they turn up as soon as they feet the ground. I am not playing around. I hit them, I bet that they feeling me now.
When it comes to the Showstopper, we like to discuss the adjustments that the team can make to improve from a Week 1 loss, or if it was a win, what adjustments can they make to keep it going, like keep the winning streak going when they do win. And here and now, I'm going to say there's a lot they need to improve on, and it mainly stems with the fronts of both the offensive line and the defensive line, because the defense was not getting enough pressure on the other team. When you look at the fact that they only had 1 sack by Cleveland Farrell that we talked about and didn't force any turnovers. And it all stems from the front. You got to be able to attack that other side in their offensive line. And if they can't do it, there's no way they're going to be able to succeed with forcing turnovers, because you either got to get to the running back, you got to get to the quarterback. Because within a matter of a few seconds, one of the two of them is going to have the ball on average in every play, whether the running back is receiving it from the quarterback to run it somewhere, or if the quarterback, whether it's a play action, shotgun, or whatever formation they're running, dropping back and humming the ball to somebody for a pass. It stems with the two of them. They are like the 1-2 punch, and it's still true to this day. And if you don't have a strong offensive line, you're not going to be able to get the ball moving, because when you look at the running numbers that the Commanders had and the fact that their quarterback led the way with the rushing numbers, it looks good for him as far as him being mobile, but it doesn't look good for that offensive line when we broke it down earlier and discussed the fact that a lot of those plays that he did run for were not designed quarterback run plays. So the adjustments that they can make is they need to provide better protection on that offensive line for this upcoming week against the Giants. And I believe that they can, and we'll talk more about that matchup here in a few minutes. But right here and now, the adjustments, it all starts with the front. And I'm saying this for both the front on the offensive side and the defense, because you can't have any type of running back, no matter if they're the best or average or mediocre, establish anything if they're not getting the protection that they need. Again, it's not as bad as over in Carolina, where they literally have human turnstiles, like my man Cole Johnson likes to say, and that's their huge problem they have to deal with over there. It's not much better at the same time. They did make improvements over this past offseason, and I'm seeing, I'm seeing a decent amount of time that the quarterback has to make decisions. Unfortunately, for this past week, they played a team that was really strong on their defensive front. Giants are not as much, because you look at the way they lost in the previous week. The Giants actually absolutely played like a bunch of dumpster Pelicans, and much worse than what the Commanders did. I mean, they lost to the Vikings 28-6, and they were playing against a Sam Darnold-led offense over there for the Vikings. So if they're going to play like that against that team, not saying that the Commanders' offense is better. Their offensive line is definitely not better. But the weapons that they have, maybe they might not win to the extent that the Vikings did, but we'll break that down a little bit more here in the next segment as we discuss that matchup. But I do feel like that within the weapons that the Commanders have on offense, I expect more out of them. I already knew coming into this season that they were going to have issues on the offensive line. It was just bound to happen. But going forward, they're going to have to make adjustments on the fronts of both the offense and the defense if they have any type of chance of having a respectable record, that it was an improvement from last year. Because last year being 4-13, unless you can at least get 2 to 3 more extra wins, I don't look at this as a successful year. I feel like they can be 6-11 or 7-10. I feel like that's those are attainable goals. But besides that, we'll see if they can make any adjustments to those fronts on the offense or defense. I will take one commercial break in this episode, and with that, I will see you guys here on the other side of that, as we will come back and discuss the opponent of the week and the final drive. I'll see you here after this one and only commercial break.
Commanders, where my soldiers, right side. Commanders, where my soldiers, left side.
Everything Boston. I love you morons. New Kids on the Block, New Edition.
Dear whatever the law firm is. Sincerely, the U.S. Supreme Court.
Ben Affleck, Matt Damon. Go yourself again, Jason
In a world where chronicles of the past are brought to the streams, whether the content is relatable or completely beyond your realm of life, there is no shadow of a doubt that this show is absolutely full of shenanigans. Get ready for
D. Willie in the Evening.
This Sunday at 10:05 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on Sartoba Media, where the struggle is real to be awesome. Whether it's news, The largest egg producer finds bird flu in chickens at a Texas plant. Weather. Devastating tornadoes rip through the heart of the United States. Inspiration. A breast cancer survivor completed the journey of chemotherapy, and now begins a future one of matrimony or sports. Michael Jordan is shown on a photo with Diddy. LeBron James has a video extolling the virtues of a Diddy party. This has been yet another Beating a Dead Horse presentation. We got you covered. BS3 Network proudly presents The Morning Shift with Cole Johnson, live every weekday morning beginning April 29th at 8 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Central. Oh, yes. The tradition, the pageantry, the spectacle, the history, the slut. Wait. I gotta rep my brother's stuff right. All my DMV soldiers, stand up!
And stand up it is. It's time. We are back for episode 24 after that one and only commercial break. Again, I am Drew Willingham. Thank you as always for tuning in. And that is the guy that we were talking about earlier, being Jaden Daniels, the round 1, pick 2 overall pick in this previous draft. With that being said, let's go ahead and take this into the next segment, being the opponent of the week.
Look how we step. Who we got next? Step on the right, step on the left. Who do we rep?
And that opponent of the week that is this week, we have the New York Giants traveling to Washington to take on the Commanders. Well, you can say Landover, Maryland, because it's not technically Washington, D.C., but hey, it's not judging neither here nor there. Both of these teams 0-1. We talked about the Giants a little while ago, losing a game 28-6 to the Minnesota Vikings, and that was a home game for them. So, I mean, expectations should be the fact that they're on the road and they played the way they did at home against a team that, yes, does have better weapons on the offense for Minnesota. When it comes to Commanders, they really don't have, but so much, there's not much difference when it comes to the weapons that they have over there. So offensively, between the weapons they have at wide receiver and their tight end, very similar. The Vikings, the one difference that they have between the two teams is they have a better offensive line. Commanders are still, like we just talked about in the previous segment, have issues with their offensive line. Now, same thing for the Giants. Giants have issues between the offense and defense when you think about the fact that they lost by 22 points in this past game. Here and now, the prediction that I'm going to say, because we didn't have an episode last week, I didn't give a prediction for this past game, and I would have probably been honest in that in saying because they're playing a team that is the NFC South reigning, division champions, I would have expected them to lose the game. Now, with this one, I'm going to at least sit here and say that I expect, and I'm going to predict that the Commanders are going to win and improve to 1-1 because of the caliber team they're playing within the New York Giants. You look at their problems not only between their offensive and defensive fronts, but they have issues at the quarterback being Daniel Jones. They had issues since 2019. He took over for Eli Manning. He just happened to have a little bit more of a successful run there for his first couple of years. But as some pieces from the Giants were either moving on to other teams or retiring, or the Giants going after big names like Darren Waller, who happened to play there for a year and then retire, and there were other cases as well, it has definitely been a trajectory moving downward for them. The Commanders have been on the up. It is maybe for those of us who like to have instant results, maybe not as quick as we wanted to, but hey, they're building something special, I believe. And if you look at a 5-year plan, they're in a true second year. Well, actually, first year with it, because this is the first full season that a Josh Harrison company-led group has had an entire offseason to draft and then, work within free agency, training camp, and everything. I believe, in my opinion, other people may disagree, that this is the first of a 5-year plan. And within the 5-year plan, by the end, the Commanders should be a team that is consistently making the playoffs, I would say, by 2029. Okay? If it's 5-year plan, we'll say 2028. Anyway, when you put all that in perspective and you think about that, there's nothing that has anything to do with 2024 or moving forward. But when it comes to this game against the New York Giants, if the Minnesota Vikings are going to beat them 28-6, I don't think the Commanders are going to win by that much of a deficit for the Giants. I'm going to go ahead and predict that the Giants will put up points. They will score a touchdown, probably a couple field goals. I'm going to say the Giants can put up at least 13 points. But if the Commanders can put up 20 points against a team like the Buccaneers, even though some of it was during garbage time, I think that if the Giants can put up 20 points, if the Commanders can put up 20 points against them, and I'm predicting the Giants to put up 13 points on the road at FedEx, with this being a home game, Jaden Daniels' first home game, I think there's going to be a little bit of motion behind it. I think they're going to be able to at least put up 24 points. I think it's going to be relatively close in the fact that they're only going to win by 11 points at home. It's a division game, not as much of a rival game as the Cowboys or even the Eagles to an extent. I think that even though it is a rivalry game going back, it's going to be fairly close throughout, but the Commanders are going to win 24-13, and Jaden Daniels is going to scramble around and do some things with his legs because of the offensive front. He has no other chance otherwise. I feel like he's going to connect more with Scary Terry because 2 receptions for 17 yards like in this past game was absolutely absurd when you think about the caliber of talent that he is. I think the Giants can put up 13. I'm serious, and I think that that's how this game is going to be. Dante Hill's in the house, my man, talking to me from SHOWSTOPPER Media. I appreciate you tuning in. Your Eagles, man, we'll have to talk about them if you could join us for Total Football Talk on Monday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern time. We talked about them this past Monday, and I know you've been tuning in here and there. But this being the Commanders game, let me know what you think when it comes to this team right here. Can the Giants put up 13 points against the Commanders defense like I'm calling it? Do you think that's going to happen? I'm calling the Commanders to win 24-13 in this matchup at home at 425 this weekend. That's what I'm saying. Do you think it's attainable or is it not? You let me know. You, the viewer out there in the comments. We are Mother Fathering Live. Yes. So now the Giants coming from the Meadowlands over there in Jersey. Wasn't all that impressed with Daniels. I think they put up 28. Okay. You think that the Daniels could put up 28 points in this game? Okay. Or do you think that the Giants put up 28? Let me know. I'm pretty sure you mean 28. And I'm not saying that I'm all that impressed. Like I'm a huge homer going in on him 100%. But you look at the fact that Daniels had 16 carries for 88 yards in that game. You can't turn a blind eye at that, because when you break it down again, 11 of those plays were not quarterback designed run plays. He had to run because the offensive line was breaking down. Again, they're facing a better defensive front in the Buccaneers, and they'll face this weekend against the Giants because the Giants are just trash overall. When you look at the fact that they lost 28-6, can't say it enough, to the Vikings, who were led by Sam Darnold. They made Sam Darnold look like an MVP candidate. So if they're going to do that for Sam Darnold, I know that you might not have been fully impressed, but you got to look at who they were playing. NFC South reigning champs in the Bucs. Yes, they were 8-9, but overall, you got to give the credit where it's due. My man Sick Diggie's in the house saying, greetings, folks. What's going on? We're talking some Commanders Gridiron Report that normally happens on Tuesdays, but for myself, I've had a very busy week, outside of the streams, and I couldn't get it in. So I apologize. Next week should be back on track with it. And my schedule will hopefully lighten up a little bit, for next week. That's the only reason why I'm doing this and Total Football Talk Extra in the same day. This is not something that you're going to see regularly because I usually don't have the time to do 2 shows on Fridays. So here we are. The Giants are not a good team, but you guys should put up 28. Okay, that's what I figured you meant with that. So, yeah, the Giants, they're not a good team. I mean, they definitely are not. And I think that, outside of this game, I'm not going to say based on what Jaden Daniels does in this game against the Giants that it should flip your thoughts on not being impressed with him or not. I think that you give him another 4 to 6 weeks and you really evaluate what he can do, because I do like what I saw out of him last week against the Bucs. I don't like what I saw out of the offensive line. And I am a little concerned about the fact that the majority of his completions were checkdowns to running backs when you have Eckler and Robinson Jr. leading the way for the most receptions and yards based on the receiving. And then you have a tight end in Zach Ertz, who was third. So other than that, I think that if the offensive line can give him a little bit more time, because in certain cases, in certain plays, it looked like Sam Howell had more time last year than what Jaden Daniels had this year just in one game. But we got to remember it's one game. There's still 16 more mother-fathering games they got to play. So we shall see. Keep those comments coming. I appreciate you guys participating out here on this very rare Friday. The Commanders Gridiron Report is here because we missed it on Tuesday because of life. Now, I'll be there Monday. I appreciate you, Dante, for being there Monday for Total Football Talk. 11 a.m. Now, it's 11 a.m. to about 1:30 is what the show's going right now. My personal schedule flipped, and we had to move some things around. And luckily, Cole and I were able to find a window and do the show on Monday morning. So Total Football Talk is every Monday now at 11 a.m., as it's been for the past 2 weeks. So this will be the third episode at 11 a.m. on Monday. And if you're just tuning in for the first time to whether you're watching on Team MBS Media or if you're watching on A7BN Sports or on the home from the productions where these things come from, like myself and this shirt right here, Sartoba Media, where the struggle is real to be awesome. Again, whether you're watching through Team MBS Media, A7BN Sports, or Sartoba Media, please subscribe now and never miss out on new content. So, other than that, we've got Sick Diggy in the house again saying no, but the offensive line needs to get their act together. Priority number 1, protect the quarterback. Number 2, open holes in the opponent's defensive line for the running backs to rush through. Absolutely. I mean, I can't agree with you any more than that, because, I mean, this is something that I was talking about earlier in the show during the Burgundy Flex review. Well, it's Friday the 13th. Are you feeling lucky, Andrew Willingham? No, I'm not feeling lucky at all. I'm feeling exhausted, to be honest. It has been a long week, and I'm looking forward to mainly Sunday for football, because I actually, for my career, my full-time career, I'm on call this weekend, and I have to go into work tomorrow night. I already know, based on the schedule that we have for what we do, that I'm going to be needed tomorrow. So tonight I'm off. And Sunday I am off. So hopefully I get off at a decent time as I go in tomorrow at 10 p.m. And I get off anywhere in the morning between 2, 3, and 4 in the morning, get home around 5. I'm hoping I get a decent amount of sleep, be able to be fully with it, to go watch football with some friends that afternoon, as that's the current plan, is I don't want to be tired. But there, besides work, I mean, there's other things going on outside in the life that just been a very busy week. So I apologize again for not getting this show out on Tuesday, but that is the reason why. Do you think you guys are in tank mode? No. Because last year was, if you were to ask me that question last year, I would say yes. Right now, no. Because there's fight that I saw in this team this past weekend. They didn't give up against the Bucs. They were getting smacked around. Also, their field goal kicker failed them by missing 2 field goals, and they released him this week, that being Cade York, who was 0 of 2 on those field goals. And now they have signed Austin Siebert. So I have no idea who in the father that is. But what I can tell you is I'm hoping that he at least knows how to kick a ball through an upright, because Cade York, whether it was a 37 or a 56, he had the leg. He had the distance. He was going the distance. Well, it didn't go through the upright because it was wide right every time. So when it comes to that, I would say no there, sir. We are not in tank mode, and neither is your team. The Eagles and what they've got over there for that team, I think you got a pretty solid team. Super Bowl, I don't know about all that, but you did beat the Packers in your opening game and at home, and it was a close one. We'll have to see how things go for you in the next 4 to 6 weeks. But I do think you guys have got a really solid team over there in Philly. And I think there's definitely a really good chance you run away with this division. But it's going to be between you and, I don't want to say this, the Cowboys, for the top 2 spots of this division this year. The Commanders will not be there, but not because they're in tank mode, but it's going to be because they just don't have all the right pieces yet, and they need another offseason or two. If they have an offseason like this year, this past year, and they do it in 2025 and then again in 2026 with the type of talent they could bring in potentially, I feel like by 2026, this team's going to be really special. Then we're going to be talking completely differently in 2 years. But that's not now. That is then. Says he's going to be honest. I think Baker has really found a home in Tampa Bay, but you are right. It's early. And I will agree with you wholeheartedly on that. And I've said that on Total Football Talk. Last year, I called him Bunker Stayfield when he was bunkering it up before, he was actually having some success towards the second half of the year, because they got off to a little bit of a rough start last year. But between that, looking at Bunker, now Baker, I'll call him respectively. Yeah, I do believe that he has found a home in Tampa, and he's probably going to retire in Tampa. Great weather, and they still have really good pieces left over from their Super Bowl team 4 years ago. Not fully to the way that team was back then, and he is no Thomas Edward Patrick Brady II. But to be the heir apparent, I feel like they made a really solid choice when they brought him in 2 years ago. Very great choice at that time, because they could have easily gone the other way, which a lot of teams do, because it's hard to replace legends. And even though they only had a legend for a few seasons being Thomas Edward Patrick Brady II, they're keeping that train rolling with the talent they have, like Mike Edwins and Chris Godwin, with a leader who is finally matured enough to be into a leader and has learned how to play the game professionally, that being Baker Mayfield. Hopefully the Giants won't be rocking any away version of those ugly uniforms from last week. Yes, like the Montreal Canadiens or whatever, like whatever uniforms they had on that week. It was definitely wild. Dante says the Eagles are going as far as Hurts and Nick. The defensive secondary looks better, but Hurts in the turnovers. And yeah, he's got to calm down with that too if they want to consistently build on what they had just from a couple years ago. And the turnovers kill you. You look at it, no matter if it's NFL, CFL, UFL. I have talked it all this year between all three leagues. And the teams that have got a lot of talent that can really do things and make a run, and then you have turnovers, it bites you every time. And even if it takes to getting to the biggest stage of that profession, within that organization, within that league, I mean to say, whether NFL, CFL, UFL, even if it waits to catch up to you by the biggest game, you gotta say that at some point is going to come crashing down if you are a turnover machine of a team. And how do I feel about Tua and the concussions? I have got a really strong take on that. You're going to have to see Monday at 11 a.m. because we are here for the Commanders Gridiron Report. And I appreciate you, Dante. You're firing off some great questions and bringing some fire tonight. But I do have to keep things moving, as we do have to take this into the final drive. I do have some other big things to drop on before I get off of here and check out Friday Night SmackDown.
We bet on ourselves, so what you expect? A diehard fan never live with regret. Yes, sir.
Now here with the final drive. We got to take a look at my closing thoughts on the Commanders heading into week 2. And last year, I even told you during the offseason, they absolutely sucked last year. Okay. Do I feel that way about them this year? No. I do feel like that they have elevated themselves into a little bit of a higher category. They don't suck as bad category. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I really like Jayden Daniels overall. I just think he needs more time to develop, because you got to remember, he played in the preseason, but he didn't play so much. It goes to show also the fact that you can't even use your bridge quarterback, Marcus Mariota, who I think is collecting $10 million to sit on the bench. It's pretty sad too. He's done in the NFL after this season. I'm willing to bet that, because I would have liked to have had Marcus Mariota in here for the first 6 to 8 games, and then have Jayden Daniels take over the second half. As I get it, you can only learn but so much on the sideline, but you can learn, the flow of the game, because the flow of the game is a little bit different. And even though he adjusted decently against a team that's the reigning NFC South champions, I feel like overall it would have benefited him maybe a little bit more to not throw him to the Wolves quite yet. If this offensive line can get it together and establish a little bit more of a pass blocking and run blocking scheme, I think that he'll be okay. But that's not what I wanted coming into this 2024 season. But yeah, you don't get what you want. All right. This is the way life is. But I do want to say this on my closing thoughts heading into this game is I'm excited about it. Not only, we're back for the NFL season, and the NFL is here now for the second consecutive week in theory, but because this is a home game, this is in Washington. And if, I was thinking about possibly going if I wasn't on call this weekend, but unfortunately with my career job, I am. So I'm not going to make the trip because I'm going to be way too exhausted by the time the Saturday night shift is over with. But I will say is this. I'm happy that it's back home for my people that I know that are going there to not only watch the game, but the ones that I know that are going there to cover it, because it's their first true game back, at FedEx. And there's going to probably be some exciting things that they're going to unveil like they did during the preseason. But I feel like there's going to be a little bit more they're going to add for the opening game at FedEx. And I hope they enjoy it. And I hope they get to enjoy it with the Commanders win, because if you lose to the Giants at home, especially how the Giants lost at home to Minnesota, this is going to be a long year. Yeah, I can't emphasize that enough, y'all. I really can't. It's going to be a long year if they do. I don't think it's going to happen. I'm still sticking with my 24-13 prediction, and I normally would predict higher against a caliber team like the Giants, but because it's a division rival, I just feel it's a little bit more peaceful to say 24-13. And for those of you out there that I know that are Giants fans, I don't want to predict a mollywhopping, and I want to be respectful in this case too, so nobody gets sensitive to the fact. With that being said, as always, subscribe now, never miss out on new content, no matter where you are watching this show at right now. 6 says, nobody said transitions are easy, especially when expectations go up with new ownership as well as management. Let me leave that up there a second. That is one of the best things you've dropped here today on this episode, my man. I know it's tough for you because it's like 2:20 in the morning over there in Norway. Sick Dicky, for those of you who are watching, is tuning in all the way from Norway, which makes this an international show, which is why I say across the nation and around the world, from my homie Sick Dicky. And for those of you out there who may be following suit, is I will admit he's the first. Sick Dicky's been here when this channel had less than 100 subscribers. And he is the first of the international ones to be here. So he knows when it comes to watching good sport, whether it's football and soccer or football in America, he knows what he is talking about. Shout out to my man Sick Diggy for dropping in, bringing the comments, and being here tonight, as well as my other man here, Dante Hill, who has to say that I don't think Washington and New York is that different. But both teams, to an extent, is committed to the quarterbacks, but there's so many holes on the roster. Dante, you're my dog. All right. Let's look at that TV on the wall I put up for you, my man. When you're watching TV on that thing, I want you to get a better look at this Commanders team on Sunday at 4:25 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox. I think that this statement right here, you're going to learn to accept what I'm about to say, that you are wrong. The New York is that different. You don't think that they're different. You got me flustered now, my man. You really think the production that Daniel Jones gave this past week against the Minnesota Vikings team, that yes, they have weapons on offense and they have a decent defense? You think that the Vikings and the Buccaneers are similar? You think that because the teams, the Vikings, beating the Giants, like a bunch of dumpster Pelicans, 28-6. And then the Commanders losing to the Buccaneers. That's similar. Even though the Commanders put up a respectable 20 points over the Giants' 6 points. I'm collecting my thoughts because I'm sitting here thinking my man has been on fire, and then he's going to sit up here and he's going to say that he doesn't think that Washington and New York are that different. If that's the case, when these two dumpster Pelican teams play, and I'm going to say that because my man Dante is basically saying he doesn't think they're that different, so he thinks that they're dumpster Pelicans. He's going to sit up here and talk about how he doesn't think they're both that different. I disagree, my man. A mother, father, and agree. Give me 1 second to collect my thoughts. And cough. And enjoy some Arizona green tea. Now that I've got myself together, thank you, Dante. I hope I provided some entertainment for you. I'm not fully lively enough to give you Kennison today. There, Sick Diggy. I'm here, but I'm not. I can't give you Kennison today. Correct. It's 2:20 a.m. Central European time over there. My man, he's dedicated. But it also is Friday night, so I'm not sure it's popping. But if you want to know more, because I'm gonna get Sick Diggy on a D Willie in the evening episode here soon when that fires up here. That comes back in 9 days. So not saying it'll be then, but at some point during season 3, Sick Diggy will be back. We will have to talk some shenanigans. If you want to see more, and this is the first time you're watching this on Sartoba Media, subscribe now and never miss out on new content. Sick Diggy says, considering that both teams are coming into week 2, 0-1, it might get pretty intense. Can anybody say Smash Mouth? Could be a Smash Mouth game. But if anybody plays Smash Mouth, the band, playing All-Star, they should get smacked in the mouth. That's how I feel about it. Now, after that, he also says both teams will be coming in with huge chips on their shoulders. Yes. Yeah, they got to prove. They got something to prove. Daniel Jones is not going to be the one that proves it. I've got a feeling not only he will be gone after this season, but so will Brian Daboll, unfortunately, and he's a really good coach, in my opinion. Whoever picks him up after this year is definitely, whether it's as a coordinator or as a head coach, is going to be a better team, because the Giants in their front office and the ownership led by the Mayer Group have really, really, really let this fan base down. Coming to the Giants, and I'm talking to the Giants, and we feel your pain over there as fans or people that talk about the Commanders, because you look at the Daniel Snyder era that lasted for 2.5 decades. It was absolutely atrocious to be around. It's good to be a part of something that's now exciting, but realistically, you just got to know there for the Commanders, it's going to take a couple years before they really start making some huge leaps, because they've got to at least now stay in bounds. Go down the roster, and what players in the division that you would rather have both rosters will be all Dallas and Philly. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm not disagreeing with that at all, because I even said to you earlier in this show, I said, I expect Philly and Dallas to be at the top of the NFC East. And I'm not going to be surprised that whichever one actually wins the NFC East this year. What I will say is when it comes to between the Commanders and the Giants, they are not similar teams. Are they going to be close because they're going to be 3 and 4 in the division? Yes, but it's pretty obvious who the 4 is going to be, and that's going to be the Giants. Basically, after what we saw last week, that is literally a trajectory of what is going on for the rest of this season. The Commanders themselves are going to have an up and down year. They're going to be taking their licks, but I can seriously see them being 6-11 or 7-10, which is an improvement from last year. We got to look at the positives here, guys. They were 4 in mother, father, and 13. Okay. If they get 6 wins, they get 7, they get a 2-3 win differential, 2-3 plus win differential. That's a win. That's a win in my book. That's building towards future success. You got to be realistic out here. You can't expect expect to have instant results, which so many people from this generation within the past 10 to 15 years have really just started to get accustomed to. They want to have instant results. And of course, it is gratifying when that happens. And I've been on that side of it with certain things, but you just can't live with those type of expectations. It's not healthy. If things happen sooner than later, like whether it's a following on a social media platform or not, or whatever the case may be, physically out here in these streets, that's great. But you can't go into the situation with those type of eyes. It's not going to work out. It just doesn't. Dante says both teams have the same Super Bowl buildup. I don't feel like Washington is a year or two earlier, or a year or two away from them. For that, I didn't say that if a year or two from now that they're going to be Super Bowl bound, but I can see them being a wild card in the next 2 years. I can see them in the next 5 or 6 years being a team that can start making runs that might look better than what Dallas can put up. Look, they haven't done really much since the mid-90s. Your team has won a Super Bowl and has been to 3 Super Bowls within the past 20 years, winning one of them, which is awesome and great. The Giants, yes, they have won 2 Super Bowls within the past 20 years. But Dallas has not. And yes, the Commanders haven't won a Super Bowl since the Giants. I mean, since the Cowboys won there's 3 in the 90s. So, yes, there's so much more shade that the Dallas and Philly and the Giants could even throw on the Commanders at this point. But when I'm really analyzing the talent of what I see on this team, I like the direction that they're moving in, is what I'm going to leave it at this. And despite what Philly and Dallas do, because again, I've been honest in saying that I feel like they are going to be at the top of the division. One of them will be the division winner, and the other one could most certainly be a wild card. The Giants sure as hell aren't going to be in that conversation, and neither are the Commanders. But all I'm saying is I expect to have a more respectable season, with them putting up at least 6 to 7 wins and having a 2 to 3 plus win differential over last season. And I will end our first episode of the 2024 season with that. For Sick Diggy, Dante Hill, those of you commenting out here in these streams, whether it's through LinkedIn or on Facebook or on Twitch, thank you so much for tuning into this live, or even when you watch it when it's syndicated, as this is the end of episode 24. Thank you for tuning in. If you are watching this on A7BN Sports, Team MBS Media, thank you so much for hosting this. And please like, share, and subscribe to their channels as well. And as always, please subscribe, like, and share to this channel as well.
Sertoba Media, where the struggle is real to be awesome.
As I say everywhere else, everyone, as always, stay safe out here in these streets.
Commanders, where my soldiers, right side, Commanders, where my soldiers, left side, Commanders, where my soldiers, watch the middle, Commanders, where my soldiers, now we step, where my soldiers, right side, Commanders, where my soldiers, left side, now we step, where my soldiers, watch the middle, Commanders, where my soldiers, hit 'em.
Sertoba Media, where the struggle is real to be awesome.